Alright, so here, this is the UrbanCode Release pipeline view. We are looking at the pipeline for a specific release, Pet Quality Plus, March 2017. It's using the lifecycle TestPipeline. Here are the phases of our lifecycle: dev, QA1, QA2, UAT, and production. We see on the left our application, Pet Quality Plus, that is going to progress through the lifecycle from dev to production. All the blocks that you see here are versions or snapshots created in UrbanCode Deploy. And at the top of each phase of our lifecycle, we have what we call gates. They are quality statuses that are required in order for versions to enter in those phases. So for example, to enter into QA1, the application version has to be code reviewed and unit tested. In order to enter in a QA2 phase, the application has to be SIT tested and RQm tested, which are the tests that are going to happen in this SIT environment and test environment here. So when the tests run, and depending on the results, quality statuses will be added to the versions: RQm test passed, RQm test failed, or SIT test passed or SIT test failed. Quality statuses can be added manually by a tester running manual tests on your version, or they can be added automatically in the deployment process or in the test process in UrbanCode Deploy or any other tools. So in order to move to UAT, we can see here that we need the same way all the quality statuses related to all the tests that are going to happen in QA2: functional tests, load tests, perf tests, and security tests. So here are the quality statuses required. So if I try to move a version from dev straight to production, it will tell me that my version does not pass the gates and won't be accepted for a deployment in production. We can see that we have the version 1.6 in dev right now. In QA1 we have 1.5, and in production we have 1.3. So thanks to those gates, we are going to be able to ensure that the versions that are entering those phases will have the right degree of maturity in order to enter those phases. So we're going to enforce the quality all the way using the quality gates. If I click to any versions here on this pipeline, let's say 1.5, it shows me what are the quality statuses already acquired by that version. So here we can see that 1.5 has all these statuses and already went through a lot of phases, test phases, and acquired quality statuses along the way. If I look at 1.6, I can tell that it has not been SID tested or RQm tested successfully yet. And it needs to move through the different QA1 and QA2 phases and all these environments in order to be later move to UAT. So before doing anything else, we're going to introduce a new version in our pipeline for our application Pet Quality Plus. We're going to use Jenkins in order to trigger a new build. Let's go to Jenkins. Here is our Pet Quality Plus application, and I'm going to trigger a new build. So when I'm doing this, the build is going to be published to UrbanCode Deploy. So let's go to Deploy, to our application, and we should see a new snapshot being created. So 1.6 was already the version we were looking at. So let's see if the build is completed. Not yet. Let's wait a few seconds. Let's refresh. Here we go. We see our application version 1.7 being created. And because we have a strong integration between UrbanCode Release and Deploy, we are going to see that new build showing up at the entrance of our pipeline in about a few seconds. So let's refresh our pipeline here. Here we go. We see the version 1.7 entering the pipeline, and it has been already deployed to our dev environment. And if I click on that version, I can see that it has only 2 quality statuses that were added during the build in Jenkins. So now, how do I move that version from, for example here, dev, to my QA1 test1 environment in order to run some RQm test against it? We're going to create a scheduled deployment, which I talked about a little bit earlier, which is a collection of tasks that need to be executed in a specific order in order to deploy your applications and run additional processes like tests here in our scenario. So there are different ways to create a scheduled deployment in UrbanCode Release, but one easy way for sure is to drag that version 1.7 from dev to test1. By doing this, it's creating a scheduled deployment. I can click on the date here, which is the scheduled date for that scheduled deployment. And I can see that the version 1.7 has been selected. I can click on Not Started here, which will redirect me to the scheduled deployment that is not started yet for our version. I can see that it is a very basic scheduled deployment. It contains only 2 tasks. The first one is a basic deploy tasks that is going to deploy our version to the test1 environment. That deployment process is defined in UrbanCode Deploy, and it's going to be kicked off from UrbanCode Release. We're going to get the feedback, and once the deployment is successful, that task will turn green, and the next task, run RQm test, will be starting. That second task, also defined in UrbanCode Deploy, is going to run RQm test and get the feedback in order to add quality statuses to our version. So let's take a look at the run RQm test process in UrbanCode Deploy. So let's switch to IBM UrbanCode Deploy. Let's go to the applications and find our Pet Quality Plus application, and let's drill down into its components and the component processes where that run RQm test process is defined. So it is a very basic process. The first step here is running the test case in RQm. So it's going to use the RQm plugin in order to run a specific test case or a specific test suite, and it will get the results once the test is executed. And depending on the results, it's going to either move to the left side of the workflow or the right side of the workflow. So let's assume that, for example, the test was successful. Then it will move to the right side, and it would then create a file. This is what that step is about, creating a file that will save all the output properties of the first step, which are the results, maybe one URL for the result page, and other informations about the test results inside of the test suite, for example, like for each test, was it successful or did it fail? We'll get all that information as output properties, and we'll create a file that will be used later in this add RQm test pass status step here as an attachment to the status. So here in this step, the last one, we are actually creating a quality status that we are adding to the version, and that quality status will also have some properties that we gather from the first step that will be passed as a comment, and the file that we have created in the previous step here that will be added as an attachment. The same way, if it would fail, then it would move to the left side of the branch here, and it would the same way create a file and add it to the quality status test failed added to the version. So let's now kick off our deployment and test from UrbanCode Release. So let's switch to UrbanCode Release and start that deployment. I click on the Start button here. The first task is going to be deploying that version to test1, and I can get access to exactly what's happening by opening the task, going to the Commands tab, and clicking on the View Execution link here, and it redirects me to deploy if I want to see what's going on. So here the deployment just passed. So we can see that the task in the deployment plan got updated, and it's successful. So the next step, the Run RQm test, is now started. I can click on it the same way and get access to the execution of the process in UrbanCode Deploy. I can see that the step is running and that the first RQm test step is actually waiting on something. So let's look at the logs. Here we can see that it was connecting to the RQm server, and it kicked off a test with the ID 281. So here, for the purpose of this demo, I will have to go to RQm and actually execute a test manually. It's a manual test, but with RQm you can also run some tests entirely automated. So here it's waiting on the progress of that manual test. So we have to go to RQm and execute and complete that test in order for that step to complete. Okay, so that test with the ID 281 should be now showing up in my console in RQm. So let's go to RQm. So here, as a tester, I would just log into my console in the morning and start my day. So the version is already deployed to the environment I'm testing from, and on my console I should be seeing that new test record created. So let's go to my console, and here is our test 281 that has been created from UrbanCode Deploy. So let's go and complete that test. So I'm going to execute each step and mark them as successful for the purpose of the demo. So here, if I switch to our IBM UrbanCode Deploy, I will see that we are getting progress on what is being done in RQm in real time. So we're at 75%. Then let's finish the test. Okay, so the test is finished. If I go back to deploy, we should be at 100%. Take a few seconds. There we go, the test is completed. I can close that window here, and we should see that first step being completed and the attachments being created. There we go. And the quality status test passed should be added to our version. So it just happened. Now, if I go back to my deployment, we should get the feedback pretty quickly after, like a few seconds after. So let's see. I mean, here it was successful. We're at 100%. So the test is done. I can look at the version, and I can see that the RQm test passed has been added to the version 1.7. And I can click on the test here. I mean the quality status that is actually showing the test results. Here it shows that on top of code review and unit tested, now I have this RQm test pass quality status added. And I have an attachment, the RQm test result txt, and also a comment that contains some HTML here, just because we are going to use that that text as the body of our email notification. So actually, I should have received by now an email in my box right there. So let's refresh. There you go, I received a few of them, but 2 of them are for 1.7, which is the one that we just ran. I can click on it, and it shows me that report here that is generated automatically once we get the results of our tests. and I have the link to the page where I can actually see all the results for the test, and the attachment that has been created is also part of the email notification here. By the way, these notification templates can be built in UrbanCode Release, and you can define, depending on what quality status, what template to use. So if we go back to the pipeline view now, we should be able to see that 1.7 version deployed under test 1. And if I click on it, I should also see the RQm test pass status that has been added, the same way that we just saw that from the deployment tab. So let's conclude here that first part of our demo. So what we learned, what we saw, was that you can create a deployment plan in order to orchestrate the deployment and the test of an application using UrbanCode Deploy for the automation and UrbanCode Release for the orchestration. We saw that once the test was executed, we could get the results and add them as quality statuses to our version. So in this first part of our demo, we actually created a deployment manually. So we did drag and drop version 1.7 from dev to test 1 in order to create a deployment. So if we would like to automate that process in order to save us a lot of time and eliminate the handoff, we would definitely be using what we call recurring rules, which are going to create scheduled deployments automatically based on what versions are available. So let me explain a little bit more how it works. So a recurring rule is going to be applying for a specific environment. For example, in QA1, I would have created a recurring rule that says every minute, just look at whatever versions is available and has the right quality statuses, so that is passing the gates, and automatically deploy it to that test 1 environment and run the test against it. The same way, I could say also that every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, just take whatever is available, and as testers are starting their day, just provision their environment and run the test automatically against that environment by creating that RQm test. And now, like, the tester starting his day at probably like 8 something, 9 o'clock, would automatically have the environment ready to go for starting his day and starting his test. So you can define the frequency that you want for your recurring rule, and this way you'll be able to automatically, across multiple applications, pick up whatever is available and good enough to enter the phase that you're targeting and deploy it and run tests against it automatically. So let's take a look at the recurring rules here that I've already set up for our demo. So let's go to the recurring rule tab, our recurring deployment tab here, where all the rules for my pipeline have been already created, but they are turned off at the moment. So deployments had to be created manually like we just did. You can see that, for example, for test 1, there is a rule that is checking every minute whatever is available and is passing the gates and try to create a deployment for it. And that deployment is not going to be a manually started deployment. It's going to start automatically, knowing that we have only automated tasks in the deployment. We don't need any manual intervention, right? So you can set on these rules that the deployment will start automatically as well. So let's re-enable all these rules to make our pipeline entirely automated. Let's create a new build, number 8 for version 1.8, that like we saw earlier, is going to be published to UrbanCode Deploy first, and a few seconds after to UrbanCode Release. We should see that version 1.8 entering the pipeline here. and deployment starting very soon in QA1 since we have a new version entering the pipeline. So we can see these two deployments here in progress. And one of them is kicking off that RQm test that needs to be done manually. So I need to go to RQm, go to my console, and execute the test that is going to be done manually. Now let's refresh the pipeline. We have SIT and test done, and we can see that in QA2, all the deployments are starting. So they are all going to be done in parallel, and all the tests, functional tests, load test, perf, and security test are going to be happening in parallel. So of course here I increased the speed for the video because it takes a few minutes to run all of these. We can see that functional test, load test, and security test are done, but we're still waiting for perf test in order to deploy that version to UAT. So assuming that it will be successful in perf test, then that version should enter UAT. And here we see that the deployment in UAT is started. 1.8 should be showing up soon in UAT. Here we go, the deployment is done and the test is done as well.